The thing to remember is that your research career, more than a lot of other pieces of an academic career, is really your career. And you get to define some goals. And yes, there are institutional parameters, but you do have a lot of control. And that you just need to find a way to structure that so it works. 15 minutes a day. I've been reading a book that's saying 15 minutes a day is actually a way to be incredibly productive. Which sounds really, really frightening. But if you can, seriously, you can always find 15 minutes to half an hour in a day to do some writing. And sometimes it's easiest to do that first thing in the morning. If you're not a morning person, don't do that. But the other thing is, not all hours of the day are equal. And you know, right? And if you don't, start figuring it out. When are your most productive hours of the day for thinking big thoughts? And then use the autonomy you have to slice that off and say, no, I can't go to a meeting then. Sorry, I'm busy. Right? Shut the door, lock it, don't answer the phone, and write for half an hour in your most productive half hour of the day. Not, I have a headache and I'm tired and I need to go to sleep, right? Your most productive hour. And you will find amazing results. There are some real contradictions in terms of interdisciplinary research, and there's been some research done. I read a really good paper done in the States, and it was actually looking at scientists. This woman did a study of interdisciplinary research scientists, and the postgrads and the postdocs involved in those projects would even talk about it as being a career killer to be involved in interdisciplinary projects. But that they were so excited about the research and what was involved in it and the kinds of the kind of research they were doing that they were prepared to do that. And there's been that sort of debate within interdisciplinary fields like women's studies about, do we have doctoral programs? Would these people ever get academic jobs? So I think if you have interdisciplinary interests, one of the things to remember is that most tenure track hiring is going to be at least half in a disciplinary department. There are very few full-time women's studies or other kind of interdisciplinary posts. A lot of those programs are being taught by people who are either in departments and then involved in that interdisciplinary program, or else joint appointed between the interdisciplinary department and a home department. And that what that means is that at the point where they're making the appointment, the other department is always going to want to see somebody that has enough of that discipline to fit in the department and who's going to be able to teach some of the core discipline stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens with say, SHRC grants. Okay, so one of the things that pieces of advice I give to scholars applying for SHRC standard research grants is that when you're thinking about your publication plan, okay, you should make sure that you have some things in there, at least you're almost always showing 6 years. Okay, most things ask for 6 years of publications, and obviously you build up to that, but then you're showing 6 years. So if every 5 years you make sure that you get something out in a well-regarded, relatively general, very clearly in your discipline journal, right? So I've worked with a sports psychologist who does a lot of stuff with kids and sports and how they, right? And so a lot of her work is in developmental psychology. So she occasionally publishes something in the journal Developmental Psychology, which is a very prestigious journal that's speaking to a broad range of people. They may not care about sports at all, but the implications that her work on sports has for our understandings of developmental psychology generally, she publishes there. What that also means is that when somebody in psychology is looking at her record of achievement, they can see, oh, well, she's mainly a sports psychologist, so she's mostly publishing in these sports psychology journals and maybe some education journals because she's working, right? But she's a good psychologist. And she is having an impact beyond that little tiny field of sports psychology because, look, she also publishes in developmental psych. And what the key thing to remember is, how does somebody judging your work tell the difference between a good historian who happens to be having an impact on debates in literature or sociology or women's studies, and a mediocre historian who is getting published in those places because those people think it's interesting but don't really realize how mediocre your history is, right? Like that's what they need to be able to judge. Part of what they're looking at is, do my peers think this person is doing rigorous research in my field? And so occasionally you have to do some things that are going to demonstrate, yes, I'm a good historian, or yes, I'm a good psychologist, or yet, right? And also, they're talking about the impact and the breadth of the impact. If you're only ever having an impact on a field that's this big, that's going to start to limit you. If you can have if you're having most of your impact there because that's the kind of core debate you're interested in, but then you can also impact beyond that, both within your discipline or in cognate disciplines or whatever, then that's going to improve. That's going to be, you're having more of an impact. And certainly for grant applications, that's what they're judging. They're trying to give the money to the people that are going to have the biggest impact, the most significant impact. But once you understand what impact is, then it's just about who are you talking to. Are you talking to 10 people? Are you talking to 300 people, right? Like that's kind of what it is. And it's still the things you want to say. And it's really just thinking about, well, who do I want to say and how do I say those things and how do I make sure that I'm saying them in ways that sort of say this is really solid research and you should read it and you should, cite it. And because you want them to change their minds. You've found these great things. You want other people in your field to think about their research differently because of what you've done. That's what you're trying to do. But yes, when you've got these two fields, you can kind of sometimes fall between. So I think, you sort of have to negotiate a little bit. Now, it might be in terms of your career that you kind of focus on one, right? And get yourself established. Right. And have one as a minor, like you might flip that at some point, or you might, once you get established, it might be easier to start doing the interdisciplinary work. Right. Because you've established yourself as a strong scholar.